Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekly Manga Recap. It is August the 21st of 2019. I am Nick, here with Chris. We are both visible again, Chris. I'm not in stealth mode any longer. Yay.
No, no camera can continue, Nick. That's how impressive you are right now.
That's actually a really flattering way of putting it. Thank you.
There you go. You're welcome, buddy. I'm here for you.
All right. Yeah, you're making it weird now.
Yeah, I gotta do that. Can't be earnest, Nick.
No sincerity.
I can't say something with sincerity without undercutting it with the joke. It's a tremendous problem I have that I can't stop.
Yeah, gotta put up those
Waka
barriers.
waka. See, if I say a joke afterwards, they'll think it's a joke, but they'll also kind of like there was some earnestness behind it, but not enough that we can emotionally connect.
No.
There's still a barrier there.
Never let anyone in.
Nope. That's how the vampires get in. You let them in, and then they just walk into your house, because that's the one way you stop them, is you don't allow them into your household.
Yeah, and then there's, if you let the right one in, then that's actually a vampire girl, too.
So, question, Nick.
Yes.
Is it verbal permission specifically that you need to give the vampire? Or, like, if I'm wearing, like, a t-shirt that's like, vampires welcome here, can a vampire be like, that's kind of, that's basically like saying come on in or something like that?
I feel like that's not welcoming someone specifically into your home. So
what if I accidentally welcome someone into my home? Like,
yes, that counts, because
so what if
I remember a very vivid example from Buffy, because I didn't watch Buffy, but my parents watched it. So I would
did
catch
Buffy
it
follow like the weird roles of vampires?
Yes.
Was there ever like an episode where Buffy's like, I gotta escape this vampire, and then she's like, oh thank goodness, running water, they can't walk over that, and she just jumps to the other side?
I don't know about that, but they did specifically follow a vampire cannot enter a home that they're not invited into rule. So people's residences were safe from them at night, as long as they had not been invited inside. But there was one episode where her shitty little sister Dawn, while they were like confronting some vampires who were just outside of their home, she got pissed off at one of them and was like, "Oh yeah, well why don't you come in here and say that?" And she did. So yes, if you accidentally invite someone into your house through a slip of the tongue, as long as it is actually like, why don't you come over here? Why don't you come inside? Then that counts. So,
was there ever an episode of Buffy where she was being chased by vampires, and to escape, she threw a bag of rice on the ground? The vampire's like, I have to count every grain now.
Probably not.
Damn. I got really excited for Buffy for a moment.
Because I feel like that would be an incredibly easy way of dealing with them. Just like carrying a bag of rice around, like that's
in your pocket, like,
and it's something very innocuous. It's not like someone's gonna like frisk you for a bag of rice or something like that, and it's not like you have to carry a giant piece of sharpened wood around. So I don't think that they were able to do that. Maybe, I don't know. That show lasted 7 seasons, Chris. You have to understand.
They may have gotten to some desperate measures in the later seasons. So like, these vampires have iron breastplates, so they're immune to being stabbed in the heart. So what we have to do is we have to throw a bag of rice down a precarious cliffside, and they dive down after them. And
I must count them.
I had to count all those grains.
And they're all Transylvanian for some reason.
They're like, when I'm here in sunny California hanging around, we have a normal super dude accent. But when you throw the rice,
I don't just turn Transylvanian, I turn Italian for some reason.
Mamma mia, haven't you know all of vampiros are Italiano?
Ah, yes, I will never forget Buffy's romances with ambivalent figures such as Spike and Angel. Whenever they went, oh yes, I'm here to suck your blood, but I'm in love with you too.
that really does strike a chord with how I remember Buffy as a child. I was always like, Mom, when are these Italian stereotypes going to get off television? This is ridiculous.
Anyway.
Nick, you want to talk about manga now?
Yeah, I guess let's do that. We took a recommendation last week. This is the fastest turnaround we've had on one of these in a long time. Remember when this was just our thing, Chris?
Yeah.
We would read a manga one week and then talk about it the next.
It was like, hey, how long's this? 17 volumes? No problem. I'll just read it within the next 6 days.
I'm 20 years old. I've got all the time in the world.
I have a job where they barely monitor what I do, so I'll just read Skip Beat for 16 hours.
Why not? Well, we took a recommendation last week for a very new series. It's been running for about 4 months now, called Spy Family. It releases every other week. You can read it for free on Manga Plus. When we read it, you could read the entire thing for free. But wouldn't you know it, we got in just under the deadline for when they start cutting that off. And so now you can't read the middle 3 of 9 chapters that are currently out. You can only read the first 3, and then you can read the most recent 3 on that app. But that's still a majority of the series right now.
You're not missing a tremendous amount. And look, not for nothing, support the official release. There are ways to find those other chapters if you need to, because let me tell you a story, Nick. Guess who found out that they took those chapters off midway through reading them?
So you hit next chapter and we're like, this is not available. God damn it.
Next chapter, and I was like, chapter 9. This feels a bit sudden. I was on chapter 3. But support the official release when it comes out, because to not spoil this entire review, this is a very good series in my mind.
This was going to be our palate cleanser before we get into Sadistic September, and it definitely did its job in that regard. This is one of the best series I think we've read in a while. I've really liked a bunch of the series that we've read this week. A fair number I've liked more than you, but this was the first series in a while where, this series could have been 100 chapters, and I would have read it all in 1 week. Every single time that I completed a chapter, it was so much fun that I had to go on to the next one. It's not as if I was like, oh, I want to find out what happens next. It was literally just I was having so much fun reading it and was so entertained that I had to read the next chapter right away because it was so much fun.
Yeah, it's a tough series to on the surface describe to people, because it's a spy comedy,
it's an odd premise,
family manga, and it skates on this edge where it plays so loosely with its own plot, because the main thing is the 2 adult leads are basically living double lives, but the child has psychic powers and can read their minds. So the kid the kid kind of knows that something's up, but at no point does it ever just delve into the drama of the kid knows my secret, I have to it's all just willful dumb ignorance as to help explain jokes and things like that. But despite being such a silly series at times, it has one of the strongest earnest emotional cores of any series kind of running a jump right now, where you're like, oh wow, this weird ass family actually really does care about each other.
In their own way. Yeah. So to start off with, we begin with the actual only spy in this family, who we don't know his real name. We only know his code name and the name that he goes by during the majority of the series, because he's operating under an alias, which is Lloyd. And Lloyd's latest mission is that he has to infiltrate this academy for outstanding young people in order to get close to the parent of one of the children attending the academy, because basically the country thinks that he might betray them to the West. There's politics in this series, but it's very vague fantasy politics, because it's there is the East and the West country, and that's it's its own weird world where it's futuristic and yet also the 40s. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say like you're clearly like there seems to be a lot of like Germanic influences, but then Russian influences as well, while also kind of being like a Cold War scenario.
yeah.
Like there's a lot of different little pieces at play here.
It's not really important. It's a spy series, but there's not like, the US and against Russia or anything like that. You don't have to concern yourself with what the actual nationalities are.
Yeah.
So in order to infiltrate this school, he has to have a child. So he's just like, I don't like relying on other people, but I guess if it's for the sake of the mission, I'll do it. So he goes into this orphanage and he's looking through kids and he's like, I've got to find a kid who I can get into this academy. And he comes across this 6-year-old girl and she basically is like completing thoughts that he has as he's trying to think of ways to test her. And he's like, well, she's playing on a crossword, but yeah, this crossword's easy for me. 2 down is this absurd biology component or something like that. And there's and he's, doing that. And then she turns around, she's got all the answers written down. He's like, oh, this girl's brilliant. And it turns out that the girl, Anya, is just psychic. She is an esper. So she was reading his mind in order to get the right answers to make herself seem smart.
So
because
she's
Anya,
a cheater.
Anya is a cheater. And besides that, besides the fact that she is psychic, Anya's just a typical stupid 6-year-old kid. Like she's got no exceptional mental abilities beyond being able to read minds. So she spends most of her time at home watching a spy anime series, and like there are times when she's just like, I want to just like read their minds so I know the right answer so I don't have to study. And there's a little bit where she tries to read Lloyd's mind in order to find out what the answers to a math homework she's doing are. And he's got these complicated equations going on in his head. And she's just like, and just even more confused as a result. So, mission accomplished, right? Lloyd's got a kid he can put in the academy. No, 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 no. As part of the entrance, you'd think that he would have just understood that, like, he could have just told them he was an only parent, but he's probably just got such a straightforward way of dealing with things that didn't occur to him.
I think I think the implication is that this is a very hoity-toity kind of rich school, and they probably wouldn't accept a single parent.
They expect there to be a very standard nebulous family. So they expect both parents to be there for the entrance exam. So he's like, well, shit, I've got to get married in like the next 2 weeks. So wouldn't you know it, there happens to be an assassin that he runs into in a store, and Anya does a little bit of matchmaking because she can read their minds. And so, the woman Yor is thinking about the fact that she's a hit woman, and Anya, being a spy anime fan, is like, oh, my dad could be a spy and my mom could be a hit woman. That'd be so cool. And she kind of tries to push them together a little bit by going like, oh God, I really need a mom right now. I don't have one. And so they get introduced to each other, and once you know it, Yor needs to pretend to have a boyfriend in order to keep up appearances at her job and with her brother so that they don't suspect that she is secretly a hit woman in order to pay the bills. And so they each kind of need the other to pretend to be with them. So they're like, all right, let's get married out of convenience, essentially. And they do that. And despite the fact that Lloyd is a spy and Yor is a hit woman, neither of them is ever suspicious of the other.
No. It's astonishing. So the way they justify it is that Yor, for lack of a better term, is kind of dumb. Like, she kind of just is thick-headed and can't pick up on it.
Yeah, she is a genius when it comes to killing people, but that's about it.
And then Lloyd he just doesn't seem to pick up on it. Like, he's like,
he does. He's not
she'll backflip down 7 flights of stairs, and it'll be like, wow, she's athletic. And it's just like, but aren't you, as a spy, supposed to kind of be like, well, that's interesting. And that's why I was like, it runs this very thin line of you could just be like, everyone, this thing is such an idiot if they can't realize it, but it justifies itself well enough as the joke that you're like, all right, yeah, sure.
It's kind of like a Nickelodeon cartoon, or almost.
Yeah.
There are times when it should be so obvious, but that's the joke. So, the first time that they are playing as if they're a couple, they're at this party with Yor's coworkers, and one of her coworkers is just a bitch and tries to trip in order to have this like hot dish that she's carrying go into Yor's face and scald her because I'll embarrass her by burning her face,
by annihilating her.
Yeah. And Yor counters this by swinging her foot up and catching it on her heel and then like throwing it away with her foot. And the only reaction that Lloyd has when she does this is, "Oh, darling, you've shown everyone here a bit of your panties. You can't do that. You've got to be proper." Just ignoring this incredible feat of agility and martial arts that she's performed.
Yeah, he's like, come on, it's uncouth. They've seen so much leg.
And like the night ends with instead of just pretending to be a couple, they decide to actually get married. And it ends with like Lloyd is being chased down by these guys from this other mission he's just performed. And they're on the run from them. And somehow they still don't realize that one of them's a spy and one of them's a hit woman. So they agree to get married. And he throws a grenade at their enemies, and he used the pin that he's pulled out to be the wedding ring. It's so cheesy and amazing.
So we've been talking a bit about the series. But we haven't really like mentioned the quality of the writing, and the writing in this series is really where it shines so much. So in that chapter where we're introduced to it, it's like a side plot that it's like Yor is waiting for Lloyd to go to this party. And Lloyd has to go out, and he ends up stopping like diamond smugglers. And when he gets all the diamonds, he's like, "I'll take this diamond ring," and immediately like, okay, he'll use the diamond ring to propose to her. And then they subvert that during that he's like, "I lost the ring, I don't know where it is," and he's like, "Then I'll use this grenade pin instead." And you're like, this is so stupid, but it's so earnest that it absolutely makes up for itself. And it's all right. Go ahead.
My dad often says, because he's in the community theater and stuff, and he says that the key to a good comic performance is not to have someone, be a ham and be all wacky and wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the audience, which I think is not always the case. There are times when that's just the type of comedy performing. He says that, comedy should come from the writing and from the performer being just dedicated to what their character is doing. And that's what the comedy in this series is like. There are times when Anya makes a silly face, but a lot of the comedy in this is done with the characters acting completely seriously and the absurdity of the situation carrying it across. Like when Lloyd and Yor are fighting off these hitmen that are after them, they're acting like action stars doing this stuff. But the situation is so absurd because they're also talking about, oh, I guess we can get married and that would serve both of us, wouldn't it? Okay, yeah, we'll do this, and I promise to love you forever and ever kind of thing. And they're crouched behind this crate after he's thrown the grenade and he's put the pin on her finger to be the ring. And there's this explosion from beyond the crate that is like making this aura around them, and you talk about the writing. I really like the artwork in this series too.
Oh, the artwork's great.
It's really good. You could see this being like an actual like action shonen series instead of being this goofy spy family series. And unbelievably, it only gets better after that point.
Yeah, so we're still talking about a relatively young series, but like the emotional core is super in place. Because did we even specifically mention that like the whole thing with why Lloyd has all this, like why he agreed to kind of keep Anya on and continue going on this plan as opposed to everything else, because he's like, I came from like a war-torn country, and by greatest thing was I never want another child to have to go through the same pain that I did. So a lot of like kind of the thought process, Anya keeps thinking, she's like, I have to do well, because Lloyd was like, oh, if this mission's going to be a failure, I'll have to bring the kid back. So she's like, I don't want to be brought back. But we know, like, deep down, there's also this desire in him to keep this family going, because he does. Like, it does become, like, a literal family unit. Like, pretty quickly, too, but not, like, in an unbelievable way, in a way where you're like, oh, no, all these pieces kind of make sense. Like,
right.
Yor has a nurturing nature because she already raised her little brother, and what we learn about Lloyd and things like that. So it's like all the pieces are there to make this like a really good family dynamic, and every character involved is like super useful to not just the plot, but like the comedy and everything as well.
Yeah. We haven't even talked about the best character in the series. So they go into the entrance exam for this academy, and it is absurd. They have to pass all of these like hidden tests, which Lloyd is absurdly prepared for in every regard. He's like, they will be testing our character, so we must be super prepared for anything that they can do. And there's like, like a little boy stuck in a storm drain somehow, and he's like, help, help, and all the other families are like, no, we can't help him because he'll get our clothes dirty and we won't look proper for the exam. And Henderson, one of the teachers, is watching this like, yes, this is the test. How can they do that? And of course, they've expected this exact scenario. So Lloyd goes over and pulls the kid out, and Anya gives him like some stuff to wipe the mud off and everything. And then Henderson's like, fail them, because they are going to be presenting themselves while covered in mud. They are not worthy to be part of this gallery. They are not elegant. And then Lloyd's just like, fortunately, I prepared for such a case and got us all backup clothing, and they put on new outfits. And Henderson's like, oh, it's so elegant!
It's so elegante!
And then there's like a rampage of cows and dogs somehow. And they stop that too. And Yor uses her like assassination ability to strike pressure points. And she's like, oh yeah, I learned about this from yoga and just tried it on the cow.
Everyone's like, makes sense to me. I mean, come on.
So they stop this rampage, and Henderson appears before Lloyd and the family. And he's like, Mr. Folger, I must apologize. I shall delay your entrance exam interview so that you may properly clean yourself up so that you can appear before us. I shall give you a proper chance. And Lloyd's like, thank you, Mr. Henderson. But that is not necessary because I foresaw such an event and got a third set of holy rolls. And Henderson is just like, once he's like turned a corner on them, he's like got their back because he admires their guts and their poise so much. There's this other teacher who tries to just be a total douche to them, and he's like, you are just not being fair to them. Like, Lloyd looks like he's going to punch the guy, and instead he crushes a mosquito and breaks the table underneath it too, because he's like insulting Yor, he's insulting Anya. He's saying, oh, you got remarried, do you love your previous wife more than Yor? Hey, little Anya, which mom do you like more, the one that you had before or your current one? And Anya just starts crying, and it's just, he's such an evil douchebag. Lloyd resists the urge to punch him out, and then they leave. And Anderson's like, he makes sure that they get in because he's like, he acted with such poise, and he justifies it later by saying, like, you actually saved his life, because do you know what animal causes more deaths than any other? It is the mosquito for carrying diseases. That was très elegant, And of course, meanwhile, after the interview was over, he just punched the guy out for being an asshole. He's so good. Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, he's like a cool extra element into it, because although he's, I'm trying to think of like the best way to describe him. I guess almost like Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter, where it's like, it's someone who's supporting the kids but isn't going to give them a free pass, because like the major thing they kind of establish is like, to get to this target, you're going to have to be a parent of a kid who's part of the Imperial Scholars. Imperial Scholars need, I think it's 7 or maybe 8 accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
But inversely, if they have like 8 demerits, then they're expelled from the school, no questions asked. And it's like a big thing that's like Henderson's like, even if you do it, I'll try to keep you from getting as many as possible, but I can't help you out of all these punishments. So it's kind of this, this nice little thing.
I have to say, by the way, this organization that Lloyd is a part of is incompetent. For one thing, they get mad at him for spending money unnecessarily on things like he does a big special thing for Anya as to congratulate her for getting into the academy. And she's like, I want to have a spy mission in a castle. And he's like, but do you want to pretend? It's like, no, I go to a castle and have a spy mission. He's like, okay. They like rent out a castle nearby, and he's like, hey, there's this, yeah, okay. And they've got his like information broker there, and he's like, okay, we're gonna do a spy mission now. And I was like, where's all the people? He's like, what? Yeah, there should be like bystanders and other secret agents and stuff. And Lloyd's like, just call in the like entire organization to play as extras for this little girl's playtime. And she's really happy afterwards, and so he's like, it was all worth it. And then he's like, got to present the bill to their organization, which is like hundreds of thousands of dollars for renting a castle and paying hundreds of people to be there. Because he loves his daughter, but he's in denial, But then it becomes this thing. They've got established like, okay, you got into the academy. Now you have to make her be an elite student. There's got to be a better way to do this. And Lloyd is actually like, I appreciate this because it's like, you didn't need to do it. But they actually show that he is at least thinking of other alternatives. Like, I don't know if I can make this normal intelligence level 6-year-old be an elite student at this school. So I'm going to pull some strings and have another plan. I'm going to have the target's son and her end up in the same group. So then they could become friends and they'll get close, and then they could go have playtimes together, and then I'll get close to that guy because of course the parents will be into, and it's like, that's actually that's a much more solid plan in my mind than, and then she'll be an elite student.
You must get a random child, then they must become the best at this super elite mega school. And then you will meet the guy you're trying to get to.
Like, if that was the plan, then an aspect of the plan should have been, here is a super spy who looks like a child who will do really well because they're super smart, as opposed to just go get a kid, Anyway, rule of comedy. So the problem with Lloyd's plan is that on the first day that they're put into groups, it turns out the target's kid is a little shit. He's an arrogant asshole. He immediately starts picking on Anya, along with his group of friends. So he tries to do what Lloyd and Yor have told her to, and not immediately resorts to physical violence, because Yor's been teaching her self-defense so that she won't be scared at the school. So she doesn't immediately resort to violence. She instead makes a series of incredibly amusing faces. So she just gets these really unnatural looking faces and is just like, trying to act like it doesn't bother her. And it seems to work for a little bit. And then they're just like, well, that just gives them something else to make fun of, because of course they're, little kid bullies. They're going to do that. So eventually Mr. Henderson is leading the kids around, introducing them to all the parts of the facility. And she looks over really obviously and sees him like walking around a corner. And there's just this big 2-page spread of her punching this kid across the face and knocking him into some furniture. Okay. If there are any parents in the audience, don't encourage your kids to be violent, but that was really funny. And of course, like, Henderson gets back and he's just like, what happened here? And the kids are like, she punched him. And he was like, no, it was an accident. And they're like, you clearly checked to make sure he wasn't looking before you did.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But Henderson still goes easy on her because Anya justifies it by saying that one of them, like, pushed past this girl she had befriended and was actually, like, being mean to her. And that was the reason she got violent, was because they were being mean to her friend. So he's like, you can't do that. So I'm going to reduce the punishment to the minimum that I possibly can because you did a very good thing, but you can't break the rules of the school so blatantly as that. And then the kid she punched out gets a childhood crush on her. It's I I don't have too much to say about the series because it's just so good. I can't criticize like any aspect of it because it's so funny and so earnest, like you said. There are the one thing I think we haven't really talked a whole lot about is how many actually heartwarming moments there are in this story. It's for what it is, I think that so far it's basically been perfect. It is enjoyable, it's easy to read, the characters are immediately recognizable and likable. Uh, we're currently in the middle of a little story arc where Yor's brother has come to see them, and he's a big reason why she wanted to make it seem like she is having a happy personal life. And it turns out that he's basically part of the FBI. And of course, neither of them know about it. So another element's been introduced of someone with this absurd elite background that neither of them know anything about. And I can't wait for the next chapter. The chapters get released every other Sunday. You can check it out on Manga Plus.
Yeah, so there's like a big kind of there's a lot of excitement for the series right now because it's one of the highest ranking series on Manga Plus, like in between One Piece and Dragon Ball, basically. So everyone's like, wow, it's a really good spot.
It's in the same group as like My Hero, One Piece, and Dragon Ball.
So it's like it's pretty satisfying there. And I do have to say that normally when there's like a lot of excitement towards something, I judge it probably more critically than I should. Just because like overblown hype oftentimes leads to disappointment. But this was like one that I was like, nah, I really don't have any. This is exactly as enjoyable as people were making it out to be, and I super enjoyed that we got to read it before we probably had to read some big old lump of bullshit.
Yep, we'll see. We'll be announcing what we're going to read next week. By the way, I haven't picked it out yet. Okay. But I'll let you know early so that we can get as much of a start on as we can. But anyway, yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Let's talk about our regular manga because we're going to need to do it kind of quickly today. Okay, Chris, recap portion of the manga recap. My Hero Academia, number 239, Successor. Hey, it's me, Spinner, and I did nothing in this arc, it turns out.
A lot of build up. The Shino of his series.
Yeah. He's like hitched up right on the back of the van that the politician guy trumpets on. But he doesn't end up doing anything in this other than just kind of witnessing some things happen. And there's not a whole lot to talk about in this chapter because there's a lot of just really big, widespread destruction visuals that happen as Shigaraki's power is fully unleashed. We get a little bit of mental narration from Redestro as stuff is going on because he's thinking to himself that, as all this decay is spreading across the ground. And he remembers lessons that were taught to him about, power and freedom and liberation. And basically true freedom is holding people's lives and their efforts in the palm of your hand, and you can close them all your hand and destroy everything, or you could roll it around in your palm according to your whims. That melding of hatred and delight is true freedom. And the point at the end of the chapter is that is what he sees in Shigaraki, is that he embodies that sense of freedom because he has the power to crush everything or to manipulate everything. And we witness that because he's just destroying the entire city around him. His decay has gotten to the point that buildings are crumbling and he is just cackling in joy as he does it. And Redestro can do nothing but try and get the fuck away. Like his armor has disintegrated off of him. He's trying to get around on different parts of it so that he avoids touching anything decaying so that he won't be killed. But eventually his feet touch the ground and he has to use a big chunk of metal from his armor to cut his feet off or else he'll die. Yay!
I bet he's gonna. This is gonna be an interesting rubber match they're gonna have. This is like, so when I watched $1 Million Baby, I was probably, when did $1 Million Baby come out? Like
2003 or 4, I think.
So I was about like 14, 15 at the time, and I was pretty, I'll admit fully, very set in my ways back then. So when I saw $1 Million Baby, I was like, this is a really good boxing movie. And I was like, I really enjoy the boxing in this movie. Spoilers for those of you who haven't seen $1 Million Baby yet. But Hilary Swank gets punched. She gets this big match against this like German champion opponent, and the German champion is like on the backswing, so like around ends. And then the German chick goes and just fucking clocks Hilary Swank as she's walking back to her corner, and Hilary Swank hits her neck on her bench, like her stool, and is paralyzed. And the story is not about boxing anymore.
No.
But in my mind, I just kept watching it as she's recovering, and I was like, man, this rubber match is gonna be very satisfying. And then there's the scene, like it's like a cut transition of her in the hospital to a clearly a cut scene where they've now amputated her leg. I was like, ooh, this is gonna make this rubber match really difficult now. I was like, I don't know how they're gonna get back to having her fight.
They don't.
No, it's a much different movie then.
No, I think it's like her dealing with like her family life or something after that, or something like her mom, or I don't know. Anyway,
I mean, it's about euthanasia after that mostly.
Yay! Academy Award.
It's a good movie. I can admit that now, but at the time I was like, man, I wish they really gotten back to the boxing. I really wanted to see that rubber match. Like in my mind, I like in the Black Mirror world that I create, I just create new endings to movies that I was more excited for the start about. I was like she gets back and she has like a robot leg and she's like, let's do this, bitch. And then they have a big boxing match on like the moon or something. Like it goes very big because you've already replaced her leg with like a cyber leg. So you gotta keep like escalating.
She becomes like one of the cyber fighters in Real Steel. So she can fight without, having to actually do footwork.
Oh, so Clint Eastwood could be the real robot behind her, or the real boxer behind her. He's like,
controlling her like a puppet.
Wasn't that how Real Steel worked? Didn't they fight with robots that they pretended to box?
Only Hugh Jackman did that.
I just assumed it was Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Basically, it was just like
it basically was. But
he's like, oh, I can show the robot, and he goes in there.
Yes, the many roles that Hugh Jackman keeps his Australian accent for.
He's always, it's so distinct. He's like, oh, I am the greatest showman. It's a line from the song. I don't know how.
Oklahoma.
I'm the Wolverine.
Yes, Logan's musical number.
It's his theme that we'd play every time he'd come up on stage.
That's like that's the version of the ending of the end credits of Logan that you didn't see, I will make you hurt.
It's like Daphne Keane looking, she turns the crossover into an exit, walks out, and it just and like as it slowly fades in the back, you just hear like a single guitar pluck. It's like, I was the Wolverine, and I sliced and diced my way to smithereens. You're like, oh, he's rhyming. He still got it. Logan's still with the surprises, even 6 feet under.
All right, guys, we gotta move on. Redestro cuts his legs off. Shigaraki approaches him through the dirt. He's actually kind of dragging his legs a little bit, so it seems as though hasn't had a great time either. And he says, hey, why are we fighting again? All right, because you picked a fight with me. Such a little shit. So yeah, you want some more, fucker? Trumpet shows up with the big crowd of people from the army, and they're like, holy shit, Redestro's, been crippled by this. And so Trumpet tries to get everyone to save them, and nothing happens. Shigaraki looks at everyone, and they're like, Jesus Christ, that guy's scary. And Trumpet realizes that his insight is being drowned out, because apparently having his full quirk awakened has given Shigaraki Emperor Hockey.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like it sucks because One Piece established like this thing into an actual mechanic of their
Right.
universe.
So that's every time that a cliche comes out, it's like, Emperor Haki. Power levels,
Yeah.
Redestro, however, tells Trumpet, yeah, no, if we fight anymore, there's just going to be unnecessary death. And he actually gets on his hands and knees and begs Shigaraki, look, they were willing to die for me. They were just following Destro's will. So, you know, my life is in your hands. I've lost, and it's my fault that we were fighting. I lost, but I've been prepared to die in the name of Destro's will. But he realizes as he's doing this that sense of liberation, the free use of meta abilities, he sees before him this man who, facing down all of this history they were working towards, all of this fated bloodline, the abyss looming before him, this young man laughed it all off. And he's looking up at him, and Gigantomachia has arrived on the scene, and he looks at Shigaraki and he sees this image of All for One with his arms spread. Spinner is there, of course, watching too. And Redestro bows before Shigaraki and says, the Metahuman Liberation Army is yours to command. And Gigantomachia looks at Shigaraki, and there's a tear coming from his eye, and he says, a true successor. And Spinner says, that warped, crumbling horizon, I had never seen anything prettier. Our dead-end tale started picking up steam again, to the point that nobody could stop it. And Shigaraki looks over all this, and literally a light bulb appears over his head, and he remembers what a shitty circumstance they were in because they did not agree to work with the Shihasakai. And so, because of that, they were starving and hungry and without money. And so he's like, hey, you've got money, right? And that's where the chapter ends, which I really appreciate, because we've got this big chapter that shows this, like, Shigaraki has, come into his own now. He is the big bad of the series now. He is proven to Gigantomachia, which is the most effective part of all this. Fuck Redestro being like, please don't kill us, command the army. Fuck all that. I don't know why he's a much deeper impact on me to have Gigantomachia being like, he is worthy, after seeing all of this. So we have all this saying, like, Shigaraki, oh, look at how powerful he is, look at all this might he has to command now. And he's just like, oh, we've got money now, sweet. Because, as always, he's a shitty little kid, so
it's a nice way to, like, ground the moment too, where he's like, crap, cool, we can get some sushi right now, or something like that. Yeah, like, okay, cool. I'm super excited to see where this goes, because it's kind of a big thing to be like, hey, you didn't just win and get stronger. You didn't just win, get stronger, got Gigantomachia on your side. You won, got stronger, got Gigantomachia, and an entire army of superhumans on your side as well. Which, I mean, who knows? Potentially even, I guess, a legless Redestro is a part of. Like, I don't really know what will happen from here, but that's kind of the best place for a series to be, was when you're like, ooh, I wonder where we're going to go from here.
Yeah. Well, in addition to that, there's, we know that the Metahuman Liberation Army actually has at least one pro hero under its belt, so who knows what kinds of connections they've got. These guys are connected to different companies and organizations with a lot of power behind them.
Yeah. All right. Nick, let's move on to Eden Zero, Chapter 57. My mother's a machine? There's not a question mark there in the title, but it just felt like that was like a more 80s sitcom kind of way of doing the title.
It's almost like a light novel kind of thing, I can't believe my mother's a machine, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like that darn cat. So Homura is
speaking of
running.
which,
yeah, she's like, oh man, I gotta get going, because she apparently used the B cube and found out the truth about Valkyrie. And then we go to a flashback, because we gotta find that truth out. So if we go back to the planet that they were on before, where Homura was being raised by Valkyrie, and they're having conversations about how the sushi is very good and very delicious. And they do all the little moments like, oh, I can never say that I love my mentor because that'd be embarrassing, but that's my character trait that I say it out loud. And oh, hey, you look good in this kimono. And oh, this is the little bear I keep with me. But it's worth noting the little bear is the only thing that she has from her mother. Her mother left before the war starts, so she's not a true orphan in the way that the war made her an orphan. Her mother is still out there, apparently earning money, so who knows? But Mora doesn't care about that right now because she sees Valkyrie as her mentor, and that's all she needs right now. She's like, that's my mother. She's not my mother, she's my mentor.
She actually gets upset with, like, because they're like, there are these women who are, saying some mean things about Valkyrie from the sidelines, and they're like, oh, I can't talk. Can you believe that robot is trying to play mother to her? And Homer's like, she's not my mother, she's my mentor, and she's really strong and kind, and she's standing up for her, but she's always clarifying, she's not my mother, she's my mentor. Shut up.
Yeah. And then we cut over to a bunch of high school bullies who talk about how hot Homura's mom is. Because
it's really weird.
This is a thing that people would do, where they would walk up to somebody and be like, your
mom is hot.
Are your mom's boobs soft? Now, there's an entire underlying conversation here to the fact that they see Homura's mom as Valkyrie, and Valkyrie is a robot. So they're like, oh, your mom's not really a person. It's a thing. So by that nature, we are allowed to objectify it and want to feel up its breasts as much as possible. But this scene still comes across very strange and out of place in this moment, because you're like, I can't imagine people talking like this, which is significant because this leads to the crux of the entire chapter, where Homura has to go before like the head town official, who's the father of one of the kids that she insulted. And
and punched, apparently
punched as well. And she has to apologize because he's like, well, my kid's a dickhead, but you just got to say you're sorry. And Valkyrie's like, yeah, you got to learn that you can't use violence to like solve your problems. You can't use it against like weaker people than you. Like, apologizes in order from you. But Homura won't apologize because she's like, you insulted my mentor. You apologize.
No, you.
Yeah. And then they get into a big fight again, and the kid's like, you should brand her on the face. And I'm surprised they didn't do that. I'm really shocked that wasn't another fetish hero wanting to get out of his fetish pocket, which is a thing that people have. He has a little pocket, and inside are just all the little things.
No, this fetish just...
he just opens it up.
Some people have bigger pockets than others, I think.
He just opens it up, and it's just like, why don't you have a feet-licking chapter? And he's like, all right. And he starts drawing.
Hero doesn't have a pocket. He's got a fetish duffel bag.
It's like a bag of holding a fetish.
Is there infinite space inside of it?
There's no stopping it. So basically,
which is fine, by the way. He's just a little bit weird and putting it in his series for 15-year-olds to read sometimes.
So what's his name? The
magistrate.
Magistrate is basically like kind of understandable. It's weird because I
was shocked because
he's reasonable.
He could have I was expecting this guy, because this is like the hero way to have this guy be just as big a douchebag as his son.
I was truly 100% expected to be like, oh, well, you shamed my family, so I'll shame you. You guys had to walk home naked or some shit, something like that, where instead he's just like, I spoiled my kid a little too much. Anyway, you got to kind of actually do the thing, though. Yeah, I actually had to apologize.
Yeah. And because he actually talks to her after, like, they've just kind of taken the kids away because they're clearly not getting anywhere.
So yeah, he basically says, like, if you can't discipline her, then you shouldn't be her mother. And she's like, well, I'm not. And he's like, yeah, but you're not actually her mother. So
well, he says machines. He says, I can love my son. And she's like, are you saying machines can't? And he's like, no. Well,
yes, probably. I mean, I'm not that reasonable. Whoa, hey, come on. I got to be a bad guy some way. But no, he's like, yeah, you're not actually her mother. So
Hmm.
your ability to love her is going to be a little bit different. And that seems to affect Valkyrie greatly. So Valkyrie is walking home with her and basically says at that moment, she's like, I should have said something to her, but I didn't because, I kept seeing her hold on to that little bear that was the symbol of her mother. And that's when I made up my mind to find her real mother. And this is, Nick, where I said to myself, I hope this doesn't go the one place I feel like it's about to. And I cursed myself. I set it into motion. So we just see a scene of Valkyrie going to visit
Zhao Mei.
Time super person. And,
Narrator girl.
Yeah, narrator girl. And narrator girl's like, oh, you want to find Hamura's real mother? And she's like, yes, I had to find her real mother. She's like, well then, I suppose I'll tell you where she is. Where her real mother, Kurenai Kagetsu, is. And I was like, story, there was no need for this. There was no need to tie these two characters together. Mm-hmm. This feels like such an afterthought thing, and there's not really any cool payoff in stretch for this. Like, I'm like, holy shit, these two characters who have never interacted before are connected.
I think that's the real problem with this, because I think that, until you get to the exact reveal, I think that there's a lot of good stuff in this chapter. I really like seeing the relationship between Homura and Valkyrie, and I like, the explanation for why Valkyrie, feels that she has to do this, because it's like, and I like the driving home of the point of like she carries around this symbol of her real mother, so I can't fill that void for her, because clearly she's some part of her still does want her back, so she feels that that's something she has to do, and that's why she went away. I would be okay with Homura and Kurenai being related if we knew more about Kurenai at this point. We know that she is, a sadist and that she's power hungry and all that stuff, but it still feels as though we haven't really gotten a real feel for who she is as a person for this to have as big of an impact as it could have had. If we had had more scenes of her in her throne room and like really had it driven home the point of how greedy she was, how selfish she was, how sadistic she was, then this would be more impactful. And it wouldn't have had to even be a whole lot more. Just, a few more chapters where we would have that scene for, about a quarter or a third of it of seeing her operate and have that consistent establishment of her character. And then you could see like, this is what it actually means that this person, this cruel person, is Homura's mother. So
it might be interesting for the payoff that'll potentially happen. My hope is that what we get is, Homura meets her, Kurenai just mentions like, oh man, it was so great not to have to be poor and destitute and taking care of a child. Once I became basically the god of this planet. And I really had no desire to give that up to come back and raise you. It is just a complete shithead about it. And then we kind of get the end of that resolution being she doesn't redeem herself. Kurenai is still just a very greedy person, and Homura accepts that, like, oh, Valkyrie, you were my mom, basically. Because
I don't know. Kurenai's got boobs, Chris.
Homura, you're saying Valkyrie doesn't have boobs, Nick?
Granted, my point is that of all of the villains that Hero has, the ones with boobs are the ones that he tends to be the least eager to actually have to pay up for their crimes.
I'm trying to think, was there ever a super unrepentant female character in Fairy Tail?
There was Kyoka, I guess.
Kyoka got a little bit more. Like when I'm thinking like a Marred Gear or a Brain or like one of those guys who you're like, I guess they didn't do anything and then they just died and they were just shitheads all the way through. Usually when it's a character like that, they give them something.
Right. Because there was, Brandish was the one member of the 10 mages who, just had like an outright, she's a good guy now thing. Di Maria had her weird connection to Brandish. And then there was Irene, who was hers mother, and they had to resolve all of that stuff. And it was, it seems to be a very consistent thing of like, it's like, oh, well, she's a hot woman, so, there's got to be more like done for her to, not be as dislikable. So,
it's where it is. The problem I have with this reveal is like this arc didn't feel like it needed it.
no.
I felt like there was already enough going on that I was like, I'm intrigued. I want to follow this. You've got enough moving pieces. This just feels like kind of overwriting it when you're like, wait a minute. What if Master Splinter learned martial arts from a book that fell into the sewer? And you're like, and April raised them. You're like, I don't know if that's where we needed. I don't know if we need to tie all the loose ends together this much. It's fine if some of them are a little like a spider web and they go off in their own directions.
My problem with it more isn't that there's too much going on. I think it's more that if you were going to do this, then this should have been the point of this arc. I mean, and it didn't feel like it was, because you talk about the stuff that's going on, and it's like, all right, well, that whole thing with like the collars and the bugs and everything, why did you have all of that if none of that was the point? Like, you just have a character there who steals the collars off of them. That is time that could have been spent instead building up this character that you're going to reveal this important relationship about. So, anyway, let's move on to talk about Boruto. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because this is a big action chapter. Jigen is confronting Naruto and Kawaki in Naruto's home, and he wants to take Kawaki, and Kawaki actually is willing to give himself up because he doesn't want the Hokage, whom he's grown to care about and see as kind of a father figure, to get hurt. And Naruto's like, no, I'm going to fight this guy, and I'm going to defend everyone in the village because that's my job as Hokage. And so Jigen tries to do something that would be intelligent. But he uses the time-space jutsu thing, takes Naruto through a portal, and like drags him into this wasteland. And he's like, "There's nothing here, and I'm gonna leave you here." And again, acid dimension. Could have just left him in the acid dimension.
You're like, oh wow, this is really easy. Turns out you have the ability to just move people to other dimensions, and they don't have the ability to get out. This is a pretty overpowered ability.
So he just leaves him in this wasteland and is just going to just leave him there and then go back and do what he was going to do. But then the first time in years, Chris, possibly over a decade, Sasuke appears through a time-space portal with his own Rinnegan jutsu thing and kicks him, and I'm like, fuck yes, Sasuke's here!
Nick's like, oh! I want to see Nick pop for Sasuke.
I was like, oh my god, yeah, Sasuke. And then I was like, wait a minute, did I just feel that?
yeah, like somewhere the younger me is like, there's this weird like cross time moment where like you as a child, like you at, well, I guess not you as a child, I guess you at like
you as a teenager
19 was like, I hate Sasuke, and then like this moment passes by on like the time roller coaster or whatever, and you were just like, oh, my heart, what's happening? No.
Boruto Sasuke is really good.
And
anyway,
that's where you like decided like this was gonna be your loop, where you're like, I must go in the future and kill my future self so I don't grow up to love Sasuke like he does.
Wait a minute.
That's how it works, I think.
We also see a little bit of Boruto and Sarada seeing some of the stuff that's happened as they make their way to where Naruto was. And Naruto is fighting with Jigen. Sasuke is fighting with Jigen. They find out that Jigen's specialty is a size manipulation jutsu. So he has actually been making these chakra rods appear by shrinking them down, stabbing them into someone, and then having them grow large again so that they strike a mortal blow. So he's actually doing really well against the two of them. Naruto in particular is really struggling because like his shadow clones are just falling like dominoes. But they figure out what his jutsu is, and they manage to and they figure out like, oh, he's disappearing and reappearing by actually like shrinking himself and then growing himself again. So they manage to basically corner him by having Naruto use this massive Rasengan to force him to have to absorb it. And then while he's busy absorbing it, his movement is slow, so Sasuke is able to strike a blow. But then when he reappears, he's just got the karma kind of growing over his body again. And they're like, oh, what's this transformation? And that's where the chapter ends.
So Boruto every month rather, always throws me a curveball because I forget it exists. And I go into weekly manga recap having read all of the series over the weekend, and then I click on the page to get my tabs open, and I'm like, I didn't read Boruto, so I hadn't read Boruto this week. And flipping through the chapter now, it seems like it's pretty fun. I don't know if that's a proper evaluation, but I legitimately think Boruto is still a pretty fun series that, has some faults at times, but otherwise has become like a pretty fun kind of like follow-up to Naruto that kind of builds upon itself. Which is sort of weird because we actually have another Kishimoto series running, and this is the one that I'm far more interested in following.
Samurai 8, The Tale of Hachimaru. So Hachimaru is introduced to his 7 brothers, and one of them is like, I am Ikaku, and I'm like, you better have a 3-segmented spear thing. So
he's like, no, it's only 2 segments.
Oh.
I'm like, just get out of here then.
So Hachimaru's siblings seem really boring here in chapter 14, Father's Secret, because only one of them is talking, the others are just kind of going, I'm doing nothing.
It's, I guess, significant that they're all supposed to look alike and be emotionless because they were all created just to basically be a key for Pandora's box or the other box, whatever
there are
goal
2 boxes.
Whatever goal this series is trying to accomplish that I don't have the codex
it's just
for.
It's just what the series needed, Chris. More lore.
It's like when I started playing Final Fantasy 13 and you open it up and you're like, what's a foul C? Oh, they won't stop saying it. All right, just nod and play along like you understand.
Can you imagine if like your PC in a game followed like your knowledge of stuff as opposed to having preset dialogue and just being like, yeah.
Yeah, all these samurais are keys. That's how this world works for sure. So I guess it makes sense that they have no personality, but
Look, just give me your cute hat so that we can be friends. Like,
come on now. But it is super boring.
Which of you am I marrying in this timeline?
It's a Fire Emblem universe then. All I have to consider is who I'm marrying. But yeah, it's super boring that all these characters look exactly the same and don't really have any distinguishing personality differences, but it makes sense. But that's still really boring.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense that they're functional because they're androids or whatever, but yeah. So there are 7 keys to open a box, but the balance was lost when you, the 8th, were born. The effectiveness of the 7 keys dimmed as a result. If your power is not returned to us, we will not be able to open the box, so we need you. And of course, when that happens, you will die. But I want you to understand that is just restoring this project to its intended state. When you emerged, you were dying despite having stolen our strength from us. From the perspective of the experiment, the 7 of us were a success, but you were the exception, the project's failure. And so Dharma's like, you've already opened Pandora's box? And Nara's like, no, not that one. Mandala's box. And Dharma's like, I know what this means, even though the audience doesn't. We will explain later in another lore-heavy chapter.
Me like, oh boy, I can't wait to find out about this thing I definitely already know about, like just beads of sweat dripping from my face.
So Dharma's like, you have committed treason, Atta. Do you think this is what Hana wants, for you to become a traitor? And Atta's like, I wasn't the one who committed treachery first. It was God. Jesus Christ, be a little more
fucking dramatic, man.
And Dharma, as the hologram goes away, is just like, you have lost your heroism, Atta. And Atta's like, we will meet again. And if we do, you will lose everything. I have one last present for you. Please take it. And Dharma's like, what's he talking about? And we don't find out what he's talking about. Anyway, Hachimaru's father is fucking dying over here. Hachimaru is, desperate to try and find a solution. He suggests that they take his father back to the life support device that he was hooked up to for his entire life. And he's like, okay, let's go quickly. I'm sorry, Anne, but we're going to have to fly fast. But Hagamichi looks up and it's starting to rain. And he's like, if we're going to, transport a sick patient in this condition, in this weather, that could actually be detrimental to him at this point. So we should actually look for a proper medical facility instead. And eventually Hachimaru's father's just like, I'm not going to make it. And so he has some last words to share with his son. And yeah, he says, like, look, I was done for as soon as I activated the device in my chest. And he starts talking to him about, his siblings. And he's like, look, the things they said are all true. In fact, I once actually tried to kill you. I thought that if I killed you before your power was returned to the septuplets, that they wouldn't be able to open the boxes. And we see a flashback of him reaching out towards Hachimaru, and Hachimaru's tiny hand just grabs around his one finger because Hachimaru is so small and weak at this point. And he realized that he couldn't do it. And he says, I was lonely. My existence was nothing but lab experiments. And in that moment, I felt something inside of me, a special feeling. So I left. I took you and fled the lab and taught you demonic language and gave you wolves to raise so that you could be a cool sniper. Look, the parallels.
Yeah, you know what? This would make for a much more interesting series if he taught fucking Hachimaru.
Now help Emma. Now help Emma make the new promise.
And we're like, holy shit, this series is it's like a weird spin-off tie-in series to the Promised Neverland, which is weird because it adds a bunch of lore that the Promised Neverland never addresses. But, I guess that's for their world. It's sort of like how when the Avengers face a threat, Doctor Strange comes in, and you're like, don't you have, multiverses to save? Like, aren't you keeping Nightmare or Dormammu from entering our universe and obliterating all existence and reality that we know of?
But didn't you see I tried to summon the mirror dimension and Thanos shattered it, so that won't work.
He's like, hey, somebody has to stop Carnage. It's like, I don't think we need all of us here. You should still be on Dormammu duty.
Isn't that a Spider-Man villain?
Oh, we can't use him anymore. Dormammu's already infiltrated the universe.
So, he basically tries to say that Hachimaru's like, yeah, I swore to protect you, but I failed to do that. In the end, I was just, bluffing. And Hachimaru's like, no, you wasn't a bluff, Dad. They have an emotional conversation, and Hachimaru's, apologizing for being a shitty kid, and he's like, please don't die. And he says, look, you being hooked up to that life support device, that wasn't the thing holding you back. It was me. I decided you were on the side that needed protection. I didn't believe in your growth or your dreams or any of your choices. But the truth is, you were always strong from the very beginning. You were always a very strong boy. And he's like, you've proven it. By now, you are a samurai on the protecting side. And Hachimaru puts his hand on his dad's chest. He apologizes for giving him grief all this time. And his father just says, yeah, you were selfish and you were a brat, but, that's why I had such an enjoyable life, is because you were that way. So I'm glad that I had you for a son. And he takes his hand and he takes An's hand and he puts them together, and he's like, you try to protect him. To have something to protect is surely the sign of a good life. You must now be strong for her and keep her safe and go protect the galaxy. Stop Ata. No pressure.
Come on, kid. Hop to it.
And then he just says, that's enough father-son talk. Now is the time to leave. And he dies. And Hachimaru is, holding his head in his arms, and Anne's crying, and Hayasaka is howling, and that's it. He's dead. So, I mean, there's some good stuff in this chapter. It does have some strong visuals, I think, in it, with the tiny finger grab and just Hachimaru holding his father's head in his arms while he's passed away and the rain is falling on them. But man, it doesn't start off on the right foot. We are the lore creatures. We are your lore, Hachimaru. There is more lore waiting for you ahead. And it's like there's like an emotional thing we want to get to. Go away, so.
Yeah, so this is the game. This is the moment where I kind of as this chapter ends, you would expect like to pan up into the sky, and in the sky the title card like Samurai 8 would appear. You're like, the
Yeah.
prologue
End of
is
prologue.
done. But it doesn't. Also, it's sort of weird that Kishimoto's been doing this for so long, and he has a really weird way of framing this final super significant panel when you're like, why is what's his name and his dog like the biggest things? Like, why are we seeing them super close up, but like the super emotional scene? Because I had to like squint. I was like, oh yeah, I guess Daruma's in there. And I was like, this seems like a weird way to frame this shot with what's his name up in the front, but it's still like, super emotional. It hits on the good moments. The moment of like, oh, the moment I was gonna save you is when I saw you gripping to life with your little baby hands. You're like, it's very sweet. It's very, very nice. But as you said, all of the samurai stuff is just overwhelming, and we just keep getting more of it.
Mm-hmm. I do wonder how much of the series artwork Kishimoto has a hand in directing, because I don't know if he actually does a manuscript or if he just writes.
I mean, I don't assume this has to be like kind of one of those partnership things, right? Like a writer artist combo where he doesn't handle all the rigors of like the artistry, but he must have some say in it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the methodology between the two of them is, but yeah, I agree with you. It was really weird seeing not just Hagamichi, but Hagamichi's key holder be like, I'm a big dog.
I was like, oh yeah,
taking up a third of this panel.
I guess everyone has these dogs, which begs the question, Nick. And let's just get really real here. Why does every samurai need a dog and a princess? I feel like that's too much. You should need one thing. You can't have both. So Hachimaru, you're either gonna have to kill your dog or your girlfriend. Which I have to assume. The Joker has thrown that exact same scenario to Batman at some point.
Yes, Batman. You're going to have to either kill Catwoman or Ace the Bat Hound.
And Batman's like, don't you ever touch my dog.
He's only been in, some parts of. He's honestly one of the more overlooked parts of my mythos.
I mean, they're doing a Batwoman TV show. He has less clout than Batwoman.
All right.
That joke feels like it was really weird now.
To the Last Saiyuki, Chris. The last Saiyuki. Final chapter, the Last Saiyuki. I do recall that we were having some people in the chat room a couple weeks ago telling us that they'd heard that this chapter was going to be the last one, but I wasn't sure of that. About a third of the way through this chapter, I was like, okay, this is the last chapter.
Okay, we're done now.
So, Ryunosuke and Koharu and Estelle have come out of the Black Gate that Koharu had walked through. And Gohaku is there to greet them, and he is bowing his head in apology. And almost all of the dialogue in this chapter is just this one speech that Ryunosuke delivers. There is a tiny little bit where a little nameless boy comforts his mother for a couple of word bubbles. There are a few bits where Gohaku opens his mouth and ellipses come out. Otherwise, it is all Ryunosuke talking. And there are some really cool things that he says, I feel like. The primary stuff that he does is that, he does kind of berate his dad a little bit, but he's like, hey, look, lift your head up. I know you feel guilt and you felt guilt all this time, but are you trying to tell me that, all the happy times we shared together were lies? Then, screw you. I know that it wasn't a complete lie. We had fun when we went to the ball game together, when we went to the beach together. And I was really happy that I was able to find these people that I could rely on, these friends, my sister Kohaku. And hey, Estelle just made us a promise. That ominous thing she said at the end of the last chapter? We didn't have enough space in order to let her say it herself, so I'm just going to summarize. She said that she's going to be by my side this entire time with me and Koharu. That's what she said. That's the gist of it. But he says something really cool, which is that one day he wants to be able for the three of them to go to school together. He wants them to be able to make more friends. He wants to play in a baseball game again with Shige. He wants their friends to come and cheer them on in the baseball game. I want to go to a summer festival, eat baked yams in the fall, make an igloo in the winter. Okay. And one day I want to hit a home run in that ballpark. And one day I want to go to the beach with you again, Dad. and I want us to, play catch, get all worn out. I want us to eat Furuka Sensei's cooking. It'll be a fun day, and even you will laugh out loud. And for me, and he says, for me, this place is not hell. I don't care what you and mom wanted for me. I don't care how scary this time is. I know that there are a lot of fun things here, and I want to do a lot of them. And there are people I want to be here with. And he holds Koharu and Estelle's hands and says, and there are people who want to be with me. And we will fight against anyone for what we want. And that's the midway point of the chapter. Already really good, yeah. I think.
I do love the moment where it's like, and we'll hang out with people, and they'll come to cheer at our games. Like this girl who clearly was going to be introduced very soon because they're going to be a character I was going to keep around. But, fuck it. I came up with the design. I'm going to use it for a couple goddamn panels.
There is so much in this chapter of like, oh, look at the ideas I didn't get to use. It's nowhere is it more apparent than like the third to last page, but that's definitely the characters showing up and being like, yeah, I didn't get to do any of the actual establishing characters with these two girls, but here they are anyway.
Yeah.
The last half of the chapter is primarily narration from Ryunosuke's perspective, and he basically says, we know of the despair that is coming and that we will need courage to face it. And we see either Koharu or Kei with the mask on. In the television broadcast, we saw in the first chapter calling upon people's fears, and we see this huge Oni-looking thing with giant glowing wings appearing over the horizon, looming over this city. All these people watching on TV appear and be terrified. And Ryunosuke says a lot of people may, a single person may only have a little bit of courage, may crack under the pressure. But even if it's just a little bit, if we add it all together, if everyone's hopes of the future gathered together, there's no fear that can't be overcome. And we see an older crew of kids. There's Ryunosuke there, Koharu there, Shige is there, Estelle is there, and they're with Gohaku and Fukuda. And some other character we've never seen before with glowing white hair, and he's got the crown from the weird leader of the group with the googly eyes floating over his head. Is
that the evil kid we met earlier?
Possibly. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. He's way in the background, and most of his face is covered. But I do like some parts of this because I really like some of the details in this one little image because Ryunosuke's got his baseball bat. He's wearing his hat differently. Koharu has a dragon tail the way that Ryunosuke does. And Estelle is dressing the way that Fukuda does with this polka dotted tie and the suspenders and stuff. And we see Ryunosuke like taking a batting stance and swinging the bat while like energy crackles around him. And he says, I already know what the end of this story is. I know what the future holds. And then cut to black. The very last image of the series is a big 2-page spread of a baseball flying through the air because he's just hit a home run. It's a really optimistic ending for a series cut so soon, honestly. And it actually made me feel really happy to read it, which took me by surprise because usually you have this really bittersweet feeling whenever you finish a series. But this gave me so like, oh, this would have been so cool, but look at how cool it is anyway. And I love the message of like, I already know what this series is how this story is going to end. And it's like his confidence that they're going to get that happy ending makes me feel like, yeah, okay, good, they won.
Yeah, there's no need to be like, I wonder how it goes, because you're like, the tone definitely seems to suggest that they all stand together and fight against it, but without actually having to do that long and protracted fight, they spend it talking about the characters and the moments and kind of giving you a sense of closure about things, which is a pretty like better and more satisfying way to do it than to be like, oh, my arch nemesis brother who was going to be the main antagonist of the entire story showed up. Let's fight him now.
I really feel as though Nanoe is going to get a lot of support from just this chapter because I think that people are going to read this and be like, oh, that would have been really cool to see. And I hope that reflects in the support that he gets for his next series. Because this series, I think, would have been really good to see stick around because it wasn't always at its best, and it was kind of middling, especially at the beginning. And it did seem like it didn't know what kind of series it wanted to be at first. But once it started getting into, uh, its supporting cast and really establishing the relationship between Ryunosuke and Koharu and that kind of thing, it really showed the potential that it had. And I think that this could have really been a good series. And I think that hopefully his next one is going to be really good and is going to actually stick around. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer when you get a chapter like this because you're like, there's a lot of interesting things here that, as I said, are not going to be explained. I think that is supposed to be Sei, who was the bad guy of the series before, and you're like, I wonder how Sei was going to join up with them. I wonder how Shige was going to be part of the team. I wonder, what's with the baseball cap with the spade on it, which we see like almost, or not the spade, but something that looks like a spade that everyone in town is wearing, like. Yeah. Obviously, the things that the manga had plans for didn't really get to, but still kind of gives us in the final chapter. So it's a shame because not only is this a good series that's ending kind of early, Jump's been kind of missing a lot on its jump starts or new series for a while.
Oh, but Chris, there's Chainsaw Man, the series of a generation that 70 fucking people want me to read.
Well, yeah, there's that.
I'm not angry about that.
But outside of like Chainsaw Man, and I guess if you want to count Samurai 8, but I certainly wouldn't. Basically,
it's not a real jumpstart.
It's not really one of those. But yeah, I mean, we're
the Kishimoto, one of the most successful mangaka of the last 25 years, has been behind.
But yeah, so it's gonna be one of those things where you're like, oh, I kind of hope Jump keeps something recently in a while. I people are bringing up series that are still around. Yes, I know Act Age and Demon Slayer. Like I know they're all around, but those are like kind of like older series now in comparison. Where you're like, you look at the bottom ranking series of Jump right now. It's Double Taisei, Beast Children, Tokyo Shinobi Squad, and Yui Kamiya Let's Loose. And you're like, oh, that's all the new ones.
You're right.
So it's like, it's kind of a bummer that if everything was doing so bad that the one that kind of got ended first. Now it makes sense because it's been the longest running of them, but oh, that Last Saiyuki couldn't get like a little bit more of like, oh, let's check out a bit more.
Yeah, because if there's 5 series that aren't new and aren't doing so hot, then that means that there is a little bit more space for one of them to succeed.
Yeah, so. It was a hope that like, all right, in a time when Jump kind of doesn't have like the 70 big power hitters that it normally does, kind of fallen into like a static thing right now, and there's not like one big series that kind of dips towards the bottom to kind of break it up. You're like, oh, maybe this wouldn't be the one to get it.
Right. Food Wars has just ended. We Never Learn is probably going to end sometime in 2020. Like I can't imagine that series going for another 16 months. Like at this point, we just had a big exams around the corner chapter that we're going to be talking about now. There is no way it can last an incredibly long period of time after this. So it's like there is going to be that opening. So where's the series that's going to fill the gap? It's Chainsaw Man, Nick. You're in denial over it.
In case people are curious, what we're talking about is a poll that was created. You can check it up on the Twitters about what Jump series you should read. Currently, hey, Nick, Chainsaw Man is tied for first right now with Demon Slayer. And Act Age. They're all tied. All 3 of them are tied.
I think that's honestly, like, I've seen them kind of like trade around a little bit, so that's probably a pretty strong indication of
it's just me quietly being like in my camp, like, let's go high Q, and like I'm slowly lowering my side.
I think it's too far along at this point is the problem. So anyway, Saiyuki.
There we go. All right.
Last Saiyuki was a really good series, by the way. It wasn't always the best, but I think in the last half dozen or so chapters, it was really strong. So.
All right, let's talk about We Never Learn. Question 123. Their thoughts turn to the departing year in a pizza bet. So it's a New Year's festival.
I want to make a note about this color page that we get at the beginning, because this is one of the first times where I'm just like, is this evidence that Seikicho loves Ogata romantically or not? Because it's 3 side girls who are holding up dolls, and we've got Miharu holding up a Kirisu doll, the one that she introduced last time. But then we've got Yuiga's younger sister holding up a doll of Yuiga, and then we've got one of Seikicho holding up a doll of Ogata. And I'm like, well, Yuiga's younger sister has weird feelings towards him, but I don't think Miharu has those towards Kirisu. What does that mean about Seikicho and Ogata? I don't actually know.
I'll tell you what I thought when I saw this cover page. I was like, Seikicho doesn't have red hair?
I was confused by that too.
I was like, I could have sworn to God she's just a brunette.
A brunette?
Huh. All right. And that's why I paid it no mind. Also, we are super behind on time, so we're just going to jump ahead. This is a New Year's festival celebration. Yuiga shows up, sees all the girls in their yukatas, and he's smart enough to realize that they all look good, so he says they all look good. And Firmino has a little moment. We go about with all the different girls having a moment where they try to feed him some food. There's some silliness that happens there. He walks over and sees that Konami is there, or Komanami rather. Komanami. And they have a little moment where she teases him. This is basically the greatest hits of all the girls as Yuiga comes across them at this festival. Kirisu is stuck in a bush, butt out, and not since cross-managed with the one girl has a butt stuck in a bush ever looked so good. Well, which also makes me wonder, what are yukatas made out of? Because you see her panty lines. I'm like, because somehow in this series, no matter what the fabric of clothing you're wearing, you will always see panty lines underneath it. Kirisu's down there because she was waiting for everybody, and she saw a piece of trash, went to go reach it, and just tumbled face over ass into the bush, and nobody did anything. No. Which is the only thing I find really hysterical about the scenario, because we saw people on the bench. It all leads to a thing where we found out that all the good luck in your academics going forward charms were bought. But it turns out they were all bought by Kirisu so that she could give them to the kids. And that's what's basically the chapter. They all go to pray for what lays ahead of them in the upcoming exams.
And that's basically it. It's a pretty straightforward chapter, but it's also really, really nice. I really liked this chapter. This kind of reminded me a little bit of the conversation we had back during Bakuman, where they had the vacation to the hot springs, and you kind of had that feeling of finality before the actual finale. Because it's like, hey, this is kind of like our final stop before we take our exams, and here are all the characters to check in on. And, there are the characters that we hope are going to do well, and the characters that are also rooting for them and stuff. And, we get that final note of Kirisu is really hoping that Yuiga and all of his friends are going to do well. And Yuiga also has a lot of time where he's reflecting on the year that they've had together, all the experiences that they've had. And also he's kind of starting to realize a little bit that his feelings towards the girls around him are a little bit more than professional. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of really good stuff. And there's also, just little cameos, like Seikicho is there. Freaking Furuhashi's weird entourage of girls are there. We actually see the girl from the swim club and Yuiga's friend are still a couple and stuff. There's a lot of really sweet moments in this that I really enjoy. Dr. Stone!
It's Dr. Stone, Nick!
Time to get stoned.
Time to get stoned!
So, of course, Ryusui is back. He and Soyuz try and dive down to get to the stone statues of all the people who've been petrified, and immediately they're like, nope, run out of here, I have to swim back up. There is one shot as they're diving in after they've stripped off their clothes where it looks like Soyuz is just getting a full eyeful of Ryusui's dick, given the expression that he makes. Anyway, Senku's like, we need to make scuba diving gear in order to get down there. So they disassemble more of the science cart, which Gen's like, oh, Kaseki's going to be really upset about this. And Senku and Ryusui have this really cool romantic moment where they're just like, don't underestimate Kaseki's skills. He'll just build it all over again. You should. And they're like, why are you acting like you've got a big emotional moment? You're just making Kaseki work more.
Yeah, you're not going to do anything.
So they've made a pump so that they can pump air into these tanks that they have kind of jimmied together. And at first they're like, "Oh, this is actually really easy." And Senka's like, "Well, yeah, because there's very little atmospheric pressure in them now. Eventually it's going to be really hard. And eventually they have to make this really, really long lever with like all of the guys weighing it down to try and squeeze more air into it. And Suika is desperately pouring water onto the tank in order to make sure it doesn't explode from all the heat inside of it. And the pump actually ends up exploding after they manage to fill up 2 tanks. But Sega's like, all right, that's enough. Give them oxygen tanks. And again, Ryusui and Soyuz dive down to try and investigate stuff. And they find basically like a graveyard of people, all of the people down there in fragments. And they send up these little airbags as a signal to everyone that they had found everybody up down here. And we end the chapter on this, visual that it's going to be, we're racing towards a battle between the Petrification Kingdom and the Kingdom of Science. And the final visual we get is Ryusui reaching down to Kaseki's petrified hand as if he's going to help him up out of the ground. It's a cool little shot. Yep. It's an all right chapter of Dr. Stone. They have a problem, they invent something in order to solve it. There's not a whole lot of individual moments to make note of, though.
Mm-hmm. I do like it. Very satisfying. I think the next chapter is probably going to be the more exciting one, presumably when they actually free everybody, and it's going to be that moment where you're like, cool, the gang's back together.
All
right. Let's talk about 7 Deadly Sins, next chapter 323. I'm right here. So Melodius and Gauther have gone inside Zeldris' memories, and they need to wake him up, but evil Fate Gelda is going to stop and get in the way. And I thought this was going to be like a super long, protracted thing of being like, no, Zel, I'm the real Melodius. She's like taunting you. But Zeldris figures it out immediately.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you're not the real Gelda. So she's like,
but I love you more than anyone else. Yeah, she would never say that. She is cold-hearted.
and she's like, fine, fuck you. And she withers away into dust. But a bunch of illusions of Zeldris appear, all like kind of in the same predicament, all kind of like begging for help. And
I love that all of them are also saying like, ignore those fakes. I am the real ones.
Yeah, they're all contradicting each other. This is all Melodius like, all right, well, I'll just cut the ropes. And he goes to cut one of the ropes, but Gauther throws himself in the way and gets knocked into one of the Zeldrises that turns out to be a fake. And he's like, you don't understand. If you interfere with the mind in any way, then you'll be forcibly launched out of the mind as a foreign object that's interfering. So Gauther basically sacrificed himself because he's getting evicted because he interfered technically, and says you have to find a real Zeldris. That's the only way you're going to be able to do it. So we go back into the real world. There's a bunch of fights going on, and the Demon King Demon Lord,
whatever,
is very like cocky. He's like, oh, you deserve to be overwhelmed. And
look at my beard. Oh.
Yeah, look at my beard. And then Gelda shows up, and he's just like, Meow! And he's like, oh, what the fuck? And he rips her head off. And everyone's everyone's like, holy shit! Oh my god, how'd you do that? And then she starts talking. She's like, oh, you big dumb idiot. Don't underestimate the regenerative powers of vampires. As her her decapitated head starts floating back. It's not even connected, and she's still like got the arms out doing like the sassy back talk. It's great. And she's like, you don't understand. I didn't bite you to attack you, idiot. I bit you to bind myself to your blood. So I'm going into your mind too. And we cut back inside. Melodius is like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to figure out the real Zeldris. And then one of the Zeldrises, I don't know if this is supposed to be the real one or if this is a fake one that's trying to get him to leave, is like, hey, Melodius, I have a request. Go back and tell Gelda something for me. And in that moment, Gelda shows up and is like, I'm going to find you. And it's like, what a sweet little moment.
I think that was a good enough time to admit that before this whole plot began with Zeldris, reflecting on Gelda's death and stuff, I completely forgot that she was a thing at all. So, like, she's kind of showing up and doing all this stuff, and I'm just like, have you done any of this before? I don't remember you. So
this is me in the fall seas all over again. I'm like, absolutely. I remember this lore. It's very significant and very cool.
Which of you am I marrying again? Promised Neverland, chapter 146. So the attack on the capital has begun. The bombs have been set off. Things are going well among Norman's operatives, but that's not the majority of the chapter. The majority of the chapter is seeing Gillen. His forces go after the nobles themselves, break through a door. One of the demon nobles tries to stop them, and he's like, "Mother, father, get behind me!" And then one of them stabs him through the head, and he's like, "Ugh!" Leaves the current Lord Bayon and whatever. I don't remember their names. And they're like, "What the hell happened?" And Gillen's like, "Ah, yes, you recognize your family, don't you? From their appearance, from their smell. That's because we ate them and took on their appearance." And like, except for the heads of the noble families, literally all of them there have been eaten and replaced by Gillen's forces. It's fucked up and amazing. And they take the masks off and reveal themselves. And so Gillen's like, "We're here to take our revenge." And he picks up the demon lord that just got stabbed through the head and starts biting into him. He's like, "Ah!" And Bayon seems really pissed off about this. He's clutching, the mask of one of his family members in his hand while this is happening. And the Empress is just like, "How amusing." And that's the chapter. She doesn't give a fuck. So
it's interesting that a series about demons with a whole bunch of demon politics, and that's the stuff that I'm like, boring. Let's go back to the kids. Let's go back to that wolf girl. Because all this stuff seems very cool, but I don't really know what's happening.
Well, because I don't remember half of their names. So
yeah, I was like, I don't remember their names, and
we were just introduced to these characters a few chapters ago. So
yeah. All right,
Black Clover.
Yeah, let's talk Black Clover, page 216, power balance. So last chapter, the demon or the Wizard King revealed that the Clover Kingdom was going to be attacked and potentially collapse, and that Asta might die. And that's the situation right here. And
what will Asta's reaction be? Will it be grim, or will it be
Well, hold on, Nick. So we did just fight a giant war. There were casualties on both sides. The Diamond Kingdom the Clover Kingdom is going to take time to rebuild, and he just found out that the country he loves is potentially going to die, and that he might die, and it's being delivered to him by the mentor that he thought he had lost that just came back. So there's a lot of conflicting emotions inside of Asta right now.
Who knows how he'll react?
He goes, "Yeah!" And he has the exact response we would expect. Basically, the kid, the Wizard King, is like, "Hey, so everyone knows that the devil was behind this, and I know that it's not your devil, but you're the kid with the devil in his fucking notebook shit, so it's gonna look really bad, and everyone's going to blame you for this."
Yeah.
There's a whole moment where they're like, the horns kind of reveal yourself to be devils, and the Wizard King sees them on Sekre, and he's like, okay, I see how it is. And he's like, "Oh, you could turn yourself into a bird." She's like, "Yes, originally I was cursed and turned into this, but I believe now I can just use transformation magic not use transformation magic. I can seal myself into the shape of a bird with my sealing magic." And I'm like, sure, why not? Why don't she seal a fireball into your face with her sealing magic or some bullshit? They explained the different other kingdoms that are out there. They mentioned the Diamond Kingdom is a very aggressive country with no qualms about humans' experiments. But don't worry, they're being mind controlled right now, so that one's all handled.
They don't mention that at all.
They don't. God, I hope they remember to bring it up at some point. The Heart Country seems to be like kind of in a very like nature, like a jungle kind of area, so it's very powerful, like natural mana around it. So they say that one's really important. And then there is the Spade Country that has served and is like on top of like evil burial grounds and is the country of demons, winters, and many mysteries. And like, I wonder which one's gonna be the evil one.
Then we see a map of the Diamond and Heart and Spade kingdoms, and the Wizard King said that they were surrounded by three kingdoms, and I'm immediately like, the Spade Kingdom's over there, though. Don't share a border.
I think it's supposed to be that's like a free for all land because they don't label it.
Right, the Spade Kingdom is over there.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not surrounded by them then.
They're like, but
shut up, shut up, Nick. There's four card suits.
Yeah, come on now, gotta get all of them in there. Maybe that's the Joker land, the Joker strike.
Oh, the wild card.
Yeah,
kingdom.
Wild card rules. So
it means the superstars from Raw and SmackDown can show up whenever the Rays need a bump.
I wish they had just described it that way. Oh man, not to we don't have time for tangents. I'm off, man. There's so many to go on. They mentioned like, hey, because our kingdom's kind of in disarray right now, this is the perfect time for any of those kingdoms to attack us. So we're in a super vulnerable time right now, and there's a very real chance that they're going to try to put the power of the devil that you have on trial to convict you of it. And then we get the legitimately best moment maybe of the entire arc, where we're like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. And we see the king of the Clover Kingdom, and he's like, well done, my boy! You protected me! And it's Sek, who has his shitty shield magic that was established before, and it's just him like, and he's like, yes, you, a common boy, used your shields to protect me. And Sek's like, oh, in his mind, he's like, it was completely by accident. But he's like, well, with my newfound power, it's a complete cakewalk. And it's so fucking funny, and I hope they actually go along with this.
Like Seke is named like the Grand Vizier or something.
That he gets like a prestigious position because of this, because this is legitimately a funny way to handle this.
Just put two absurdly useless characters together.
Yeah, like it's such a great payoff for them.
Somehow Zonge shows up to be there too.
Hey guys, I'm here too. And then a bunch of nameless magic people show up to be like, we're going to kill the Wizard King, or not the Wizard King, the regular king, the King. And he's like, oh, please don't kill me. But who should get in the way but somebody with scale magic? And it's a person who basically makes everybody kneel because he's very powerful. And his name's something in here. I
don't think his name is ever
said. No, it is. Damnatio.
I don't know if that is actually his name or if he means to say damnation. I guess we'll find out next time.
I assumed it was Damnatio, and I was like, that's a weird name, but who knows? Anyway, that's what the chapter ends with.
And he's here to deal with the devil-possessed wretch.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like we've got a new...
Dun, dun, dun. Look out, Asta. There's a guy with a cowlick coming for you.
You know what this reminds me of? When, what was it, Mistfall, or whoever the guy was in Fairy Tail showed up, and he's like, I work with the Magic Council, and I'm going to oversee your guild to make sure you're not up to trouble. And then it turns out he was secretly a member of Fairy Tail all along, and it just had his memory wiped.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, what a stupid twist. I want the exact same.
Oh, yeah.
This guy is secretly...
That's the thing that happened.
Yeah. You're like, oh, thank God. Doran Bolt's here, whatever his stupid name was.
You must erase your mind over and over again, I guess.
I hope this guy's the exact same thing. He's a secret black bull. It just erased his mind. Or maybe fucking the bird used sealing magic to seal his memories away.
All right, let's go on to One Piece, chapter 952, Hiyori and Kawamatsu. So Zoro has gone to confront the bandit guy who took his fucking sword and is kicking his ass. And he's like, no, you can't have it back. The sword, Shusui, was a stolen national treasure of Wano, and its removal from our land was the start of all of our misfortune. It incurred the wrath of the god of the blade, and the country itself has fallen under enemy control as a result. Komurasaki is watching this, and she's like, wait, Shusui? And Zoro just like, what god? I'm pretty sure that Zoro has been like established as being like very atheistic, so...
Yeah, it's been like a character trait of his.
Which is kind of weird, but for like a manga character to have now that I think about it. But anyway, so Kawamatsu shows up and he kind of breaks up the fight a little bit. And he's like, "What the hell are you doing fighting here and not actually trying to hurt each other?" And he actually identifies, not rather, Komurasaki recognizes Kawamatsu and calls him by name. And he's like, "Who are you?" But we cut away from that for a little bit over to where, honestly, my favorite part of the chapter where Big Mom and Kaido are fighting. They've been fighting literally all night. And so some of the guys that are watching the fight are like, should we evacuate to the mainland? And Queen says, "No, what kind of idiot runs away when the boss is fighting?" And then he's like, "Well, has there been any word from Udon yet?" And one of them says, "No, we still can't get any connection on the Smail." And he's like, "I'd better go check on them." It's just like, for the next 3 pages, he keeps on trying to make excuses for him to go to the mainland so he can get away from the danger, so in a way that makes him still look cool and heroic. And they actually get a call on the Smail from the warden, Babanuki. And he's like, "All right, do you need some help over there?" And he's like, "No, everything's fine." Okay. And there is even a part. It's like, yeah. As reported, there are no problems. Please let there be problems so that we can go and help you. But we cut over to where the later camp is, and we actually see that Babanuki has been taken control of by Otama, which was an ability that I completely forgot about because she hadn't used it in a while. But yeah, he's an animal user, so he's her slave now. And so she used him to just report everything was fine. Caribou is actually being celebrated as having done a good job by Raizo because, he shut down the transpondence until they could do all this. The mummy's curse has been taken care of by Chopper. And they're like, "Oh, we are forever in your debts." And he's like, "No, don't do that because samurai debts are really, really bothersome to have." Hyogoro is being celebrated. The previous heads of the freaking Yakuza have been set free, and they're all bowing in subjugation to Hyogoro now that they've rediscovered him. And Luffy's like, "Ha ha ha! Look at Gramps. He's the boss of all these guys." And they start threatening to chop off his fingers and toes for calling him Gramps. And he's like, "No, don't do that. I owe him my life." Raizo reports to Kinemon, who has just gotten the plans to Kaido's mansion. Did you remember that plot point? Because I forgot about it. It's okay, though. Oda didn't. It turns out Ashura was the guy at the end of that whole path of people that had stolen and bought and everything, the plans to the mansion. So they've got them now. Hooray. Kinemon gets the transpondence from Raizo, who reports all the good news because not only have they freed Luffy, they've freed Kawamatsu, they've freed 3,500 men, they've taken over the entire labor camp. Things are going great for now. However, Raizo does point out that none of them have weapons, and all of the weapons factories through Wano are now made to produce weapons for foreign countries as opposed to, stuff that samurai would use, swords and spears. Gee, I wonder if the guy who's stolen a lot of swords will come in handy for this point.
Ooh, that'd be good.
Kinemon is like, "Yeah, we need katanas. I will, go and assess our strength by going to Amigasa Village." But, continue making reports and stuff, Raizo. And so he heads off. We cut over to Zoro and Kawamatsu. Kawamatsu has reunited with Hiyori, Komurasaki's real name. Which, if they say her name more often, I might actually start calling her by that name instead of Komurasaki. Anyway, it turns out Kawamatsu is the kappa that raised Hiyori after her parents died. But she had run away from him because she knew that he was starving, having to look after her. And it turns out that her running away actually did do a lot of good because Kawamatsu has put on a lot of weight since then, apparently. He was all shriveled up, and now he's a lot healthier now. And so they have this tearful reunion. Well, tearful on Hiyori's part. And things are good. But then, oh no, some guys show up and start shooting people, and the bandit gets shot. And so Kawamatsu and Zoro turn to fight them off. And they're like, "Hey, asshole, Yukimaru, these are things that are used to hunt wild beasts, and we're going to pay you back for stealing our weapons." And Yukimaru responds by turning tail and running the fuck away.
Whoa.
Although he says to himself as he runs, "Master Kawamatsu, I'm so glad that you're alive and well. So, is he actually running away out of cowardice, or is there something he needs to do? That's the end of the chapter.
Yeah. So this is a chapter where we cut around like 16 times to very different things. Oda has a lot of balls that he's juggling right now. And, when you have that many balls that are different colors that you have to keep track of, sometimes a little bit of the beauty's lost in there. But I have faith that Oda's going to be able to put it all together towards the end. That was my way of saying that I got confused with a couple things that were happening in this chapter, but it was still fun.
I did definitely feel as though there were some things that happened in this chapter that it felt like, okay, the net's actually getting pulled in now after you cast such a wide one over the course of this. So it feels like things are starting to really come together as we head towards the conclusion of this arc. And we're going to presumably be getting into like this actual battle that's going to break out.
Are we in the third act?
There was no curtain for the second act yet.
Okay.
So I think that things are still getting in place, and the third act is probably going to be the actual war that takes place.
Because I feel like this is a chapter that's leading us up to that, because we're seeing where kind of everybody is right now.
Right. I think that we'll probably be getting the curtain soon.
Okay.
Let's name our favorite chapters and characters this week. Chris?
So this is a tough one because there weren't a ton of chapters I super duper loved, but I'm going to say my chapter of the week was probably Last Saiyuki because it was a super little fun way of kind of ending it. I really don't have a great answer for character of the week. I guess Shigaraki, because I'm kind of excited to see what he does next.
I'm going to have Ryunosuke as my character of the week. I really like, because I mean, he was what the chapter was all about in this case, and he's the one who gave that sense of optimism and forgiveness and camaraderie, and I really liked it. My favorite chapter this week, however, was We Never Learn. We didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but it was just this really nice feeling that I got. And it was nice to see all these characters that we had met before in a nice way. Seeing them all gathered together and being friendly with one another. And for once, for the most part, avoiding all the stupid shenanigans that We Never Learn gets up to. Yes, there was the bit with Kurisu being ass out in a hedge, but that was taken away from pretty quickly. And for the most part, it was just like, hey, there's everyone that Yuiga's made friends with. And it was really nice to have him reflecting on his time with them.
Yeah, no, I dig it.
That's going to do it for Weekly Manga Recap. Next week, we will declare what series we're going to be covering for Sadistic September, so get ready for that. We want to thank everyone for joining us here on twitch.tv/RoloT and smashcast.tv/RoloT. We record the show sometime between 7:30 and 8 Eastern on Wednesdays. But sometimes we need to change things up. Follow us on Twitter in order to stay updated, at WMR Podcast, at RoloT, at NickFTime. You can also check out our past episodes on weeklymangarecap.poppy.com, on YouTube, on iTunes. And you can also check out our Discord server, where you can ask us questions for Q&A episodes. You can submit suggestions for future manga by going to the big spreadsheet that Ninja X3i maintains, where we keep track of all the stuff that we've covered, that we're going to be covering. And also, you can check out the stuff that for the supplemental awards at the end of the year on there as well. Special thanks go out to all of our Patreon supporters. Your support allows great bonus content for you guys to enjoy. And special thanks to Steve Man, our tarot artist, Infamous Planet, Milo Stillitz, soundcloud.com/Milo-Jack-Stillitz, and Winslow Cheddar, youtube.com/Winslow Cheddar for the opening sequence.
All right.
And that's it.
Gonna do it. Nick, any last thoughts you want to share out there before we head off into that beautiful sunset?
I mean, it's dark outside, so.
Fuck it. Let's just walk into that darkness. It would be cool, Nick. We're going to be like vampires walking out.
Yeah, and we don't need to get invited to that.
Nope.
Oh, can you imagine if vampires needed to be invited outside? It'd be so easy to keep them in cages.
Yeah, you'd just be like, nope, you can't come out. And there's
nope.
By the way, guys, we are talking about vampires, and this is where you see that Weekly Manga Recap is actually a tightly scripted show because we bookended the start and the end of the show with vampires.
Open at the close. Yeah, we are smart.
Let's go.